Southern Cameroon to remain independent because of the mineral deposit in Victoria. It's not just the mineral deposit in Victoria. There are general other minerals like salt, bauxite, and all those that are distributed equally around. You go to Manfei, you go to Manu, there are minerals that are just distributed there. And that is why France is so glued to Southern Cameroon and make sure that he veto every decision that are made at the United Nations. France blocked every discussion. France indirectly blocked every discussion at the United Nations and to ensure that not such discussions are taking place at the United Nations. And that is what is affect. Let's look how France control Africa, the 13th colony. There are strategic areas that France is aware that debate or discussion can be discussed about the issues affecting Africa. One, the OAU. So France is aware that the OAU has a strategic position in Africa. So France ensured that whoever is the head of that department is a French speaking. Whoever is the head of the OAU is a French speaking. And that is why you find the stupid guy that is now the head of the OAU manipulate every decision for the interest of France. He's working as an office is controlled money by France. The OAU does not represent Africa as a whole. It represents French interests. That is why you know this medical doctor, the former director of the African representative at the United Nations, she was removed from her duty because of her interest to speaking the truth, question the legitimacy of the colonial system in Africa. So today she's out of office because she questioned the legitimacy and the validity of France in Africa. So today she's out of office because the head of the OAU is a French speaking that is implanted by France and that Africa be voiceless. Let's look at the case of Southern Cameroon, which is strategic to France. Who is the head of the United Nations representative in West Africa? It's a French citizens. It's a francophonie citizens. And France ensured that that francophonie representative stays there so that they can glue over Southern Cameroon. Guess who is that? Francois Lefort. Francois Lefort is an agent of France working under the cover of France. And that is why Southern Cameroon case is being blocked. Because he can't voice, because he's an agent of France. That is how France manipulate Africa for its own interest. And that is why I asked Africans to arise and think that we have to get out of this groove of France control. And I'm sure that this Southern Cameroon case that has just erupted is going to bring down many nations in Africa that have not understand the fundamental disturbances that has been implemented by France against African hegemony. Let's look at the economic bloc in the first place. If you live here in the United States, you might understand what I'm saying. If you live here in the United States, you will understand. You all know the IMF. The IMF, the World Bank. The IMF is strategic for Africa control. IMF is not for the interest of Africa. It's for interest of the European nation. Let's look at, for those of you who probably, the stimulus that were provided for those who are suffering from this crisis that we all have envisaged. The coronavirus. Remember, the United States did provide some assistance, money in the form of cash to its various citizens of these great nations to help and sustain them for this crisis. United States did not ask the IMF to provide that money. Did you know? The United States did not ask the IMF to provide that money as a global financial institution. No. The United States asked the U.S. Congress. The U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate agreed, and they decided to amend the policy that will allow the president to provide those assistance. They did not ask for IMF. That is how a sovereign nation has to operate. Monetary value represents that particular nation. For example, in the United States, the dollar represents the United States. It's a legal tender in the United States, maybe used internationally for value because of international balance of trade, in terms of trade, because of the United Economic Bloc. And that is why the dollar is valued out throughout the world, that they use for international exchange. But the United States does not have to ask the IMF how much money he has to create to put into the economy in circulation. The United States does not have to ask IMF. The United States decide what he wants for his people and issue that and agree upon the three arms of the government that make up the United States. The Congress, the U.S. Senate, and the executive that is headed by President Donald Trump. Those are the three arms of government that must agree on the principle and the formality for such an edition to take place. They did not ask the IMF. Okay, why will Africa be asking the IMF for a money that does not have no control over Africa? And that is how Africans have been made to understand. Africa has been made to understand that it is only France that can decide what money. Let's look at in terms of monetary policy. Let's say United States decided to provide some money assistance, let's say to La Republique. That money, United States might decide, okay, that amount of money will cost about probably at least 2% over 50 years or 100 years, in which will be paid for the execution of the project. Guess what? France take that money at 2% and place that money in Caisse Communautaire Française. France take that money and place in Caisse Communautaire Française. And then ask La Republique, I have money that I'm going to borrow to you. The same money that is given by United States at a lower interest of 2%, and France will borrow the same money in La Republique at probably 25% interest. So that money is yielding interest to the French treasury, and also, so La Republique is paying interest. La Republique is paying interest to France and also paying interest to the United States. France is benefiting indirectly. France is benefiting indirectly from the money that United States borrowed. And Africa is paying this money without the interest of Africa as a whole. That is why you see France is glued on to Africa. So Africa spent 500 billion a year, US dollar. It's not 500 billion yearly to the Caisse Communautaire Française Treasury. 500 billion. On what grounds? On what grounds? Arise, Africa, and think about what is going on. Of course, you see how many Africans are dying trying to cross to Mediterranean to go into Europe. That problem could have been resolved very simple. Abolish the IMF, the so-called the IMF. Abolish it. If United States doesn't need IMF to get money to provide to its citizens, why should Africa have IMF to get money to give to its citizens? Abolish IMF. Abolish it completely. Let's take, for example, why Africa needs their independence and freedom. If France or Belgium or Germany, they need timber from Africa. If they need timber, then they will have to trade it with the interests of Southern Cameroon, the interests of Africa, the interests of Southern Cameroon. They will have to trade in because they need that product that they don't have. Then they will have to look for economic principles that will allow the exchange with some form of formalities. They do not need IMF for those principles. So if we create our own currency, then they have to utilize it and not dealing with a France-created currency. They say France has to back the currency. Why does France has to back the currency? If France needs the economic product of Africa, then they don't need the backing of France to determine how they value. It's just a manipulation of France to glue onto Africa that they need a French backing. On what grounds? And that is how they make Africans to feel. They make the 13 colonies of Africa to believe that France is the legitimate. No. Africa can revitalize its economy system and get rid of France, get rid of IMF. Let's take, for example, you have the Nusum, the car dealer that is producing in Nigeria. Let's look, for example, they can authorize the Nusum to develop Caterpillar that is used for road development, and establish the Central Bank of Africa and allocate resources to the Nusum that is responsible for the manufacturing of roads, and develop them to institute research on the development of Caterpillar that is used for road development. Then the Central Bank of Africa will allocate resources, monetary value. Let's say, for example, they can take a straight road from Lagos, from Nigeria, link Central African Republic, link Chad, link Ghana, Ivory Coast, and all those areas. Those caterpillars, the Nusum is responsible. A smart government will allocate those resources to those companies to start developing research on caterpillar, how to carry on those development. That is how a government should be doing. Instead of relying on the British government to import caterpillar and tell that the economic of specialization. That is a bogus that has been instituted on Africa and used for marginalization. They don't need IMF to decide to make those money allocation. Make those money allocation to the people and let them start development. Building road development, doing construction, keep the economic flowing. That is how Africa can get rid of this colonial belief and colonial